The air inside Grand Summit Bank smelled like coffee, perfume, and pride. It was one of those polished Monday mornings when everything looked perfect on the surface. Marble floors shining, tellers smiling, and the manager pacing like he owned the world. Clark, the bank manager, was a man who believed success meant stepping on others. His gold watch gleamed brighter than his smile, and his voice carried across the lobby like a command. Every few minutes he reminded his staff who was in charge. Every customer was a chance for him to prove his power. Then the door opened. A man walked in, quietly, calmly. No bodyguards, no expensive suit, no flashy car waiting outside. Just jeans, an old jacket, and a piece about him that didn't seem to belong in a place obsessed with status. Jonathan Roumie. He moved slowly to the counter, his posture humble but firm, his eyes kind but focused. People turned to look, not because they recognized him, but because there was something different about him. A stillness in the chaos. "Good morning," he said softly to the teller. "I'd like to deposit a check." Before the teller could respond, Clark appeared behind the counter, his tone sharp. "Sir, this counter is for clients, not daydreamers." Jonathan smiled gently. "I understand. It's just a small check." Clark folded his arms, his grin widening. "Oh, sure. Let's see how small it is." He snatched the envelope from Jonathan's hand and ripped it open. His laughter echoed across the room. "Is this some kind of joke? You think I have time for fake checks from broke actors?" Every eye in the bank turned. The staff froze, unsure whether to laugh or look away. Jonathan didn't move. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Sometimes the way you treat people says more about your wealth than your bank balance." Clark chuckled cruelly, and without a second thought, held the check over his lighter. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. A hush fell over the lobby. Every witness stared, not knowing they had just seen a man burn his own boss's check. It was a busy Monday morning at Grand Summit Bank, the kind of day where the hum of computers, the shuffle of papers, and the soft murmur of clients blended into a constant background noise. The marble floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, polished to perfection, reflecting the pride and pretension of everyone who walked in. Manager Clark thrived in this environment. To him, the lobby wasn't just a bank, it was his stage. He strutted through the room, snapping his fingers at tellers, adjusting his gold watch, and barking orders like a general inspecting troops. Every step, every word was calculated to assert dominance. Customers were obstacles to his ego, and staff were merely props in his daily performance of power. "Move it, people. That line isn't going to serve itself," he barked, slamming a clipboard down on the counter for emphasis. A few tellers flinched. Some sighed. One or two glanced nervously at each other, wondering how long Clark's temper would last today. Then the door opened. It wasn't dramatic at first. No fanfare, no roaring engines, no entourage. Just a man walking in with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need anyone to announce him. He wore simple jeans and a worn jacket. His hair was neatly combed, but nothing about him screamed wealth or power. Yet there was something unmistakably commanding about the way he moved. Calm, composed, unhurried. Jonathan Roumie. He approached the counter with a soft smile, holding a small envelope in his hand. His eyes scanned the lobby briefly, taking in the chaos without a hint of judgment. There was a warmth in his presence that made people instinctively lower their voices, soften their expressions, even slow down their hurried movements. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady and kind. "I'd like to deposit this check." Clark noticed him immediately. At first he thought it was another ordinary client, probably here to make a routine transaction. But something about the man unsettled him. Too calm, too sure, too unshakable. Clark cleared his throat and stepped forward, forcing a smirk onto his face. "Sir, this counter is for real clients, not dreamers," he sneered. "Do you have an account with us?" Jonathan didn't flinch. He handed the envelope over. "I do now," he said gently. "It's just a small deposit," Clark laughed. It was the kind of laugh that had made people around him nervous for years. The laugh that said, "I am in charge and you are nothing." "Oh, really? Let's see how small it is," he said, snapping the envelope open and pulling out the check. For a brief moment, Clark's eyes widened, but his ego refused to register what he was seeing. Instead, he tilted his head, raising an eyebrow, and smirked. "Nice try, buddy. You think I'll fall for fake checks?" Some staff exchanged uneasy glances. A few customers turned their heads, sensing the tension. Jonathan didn't argue or react with anger. He simply gave a faint, knowing smile and said softly, "Sometimes arrogance blinds the eyes that should see clearly." Clark didn't hear the warning in those words. He only heard the challenge, and with that he let his temper and ego take over. He dropped the check into a trash bin by the counter, pulled out his lighter and flicked it. The paper hissed, curled, and turned black. Smoke rose in a small column, filling the air with the sharp, acrid smell of burning paper. The lobby went silent. The chatter of clients, the clatter of keyboards, the rustle of documents, all of it stopped. Every eye turned toward Clark, then to the man who had just lost a small fortune. Or so they thought. Jonathan stood perfectly still, his expression calm, almost serene. He nodded once quietly as if acknowledging the moment. No anger, no shouting, no retaliation, just stillness. The older clerk near the back frowned, squinting. Something about the man felt familiar, but he couldn't place it. The customers whispered among themselves. Phones came out, recording the moment, unsure if they were witnessing reality or some surreal act of drama. Clark, on the other hand, felt the tiny stirrings of doubt, but pride kept him rooted. He didn't yet know the truth, and at that exact moment none of them could imagine what was about to unfold. The second the lighter's flame licked the paper, the lobby froze. Smoke curled upward like a silent warning, the acrid smell filling noses and throats. Customers gasped. Some fanned the smoke away, others whispered in disbelief. Even the staff, usually used to Clark's ego-driven antics, couldn't mask their shock. Clark's eyes gleamed, not with fear but with smug satisfaction. He had shown that man who was in charge. He leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "See? That's what happens when you come in here thinking you're someone important," he said, a cruel smirk on his lips. Jonathan Roumie didn't flinch. He didn't shout, didn't demand justice, didn't argue. He simply watched Clark with a faint, unreadable smile, as if he had expected this moment all along. Calm radiated from him, a quiet power that didn't need to be shown. It existed naturally, effortlessly. "Sometimes," Jonathan said softly, his voice almost a whisper yet somehow commanding. "Arrogance blinds the eyes that should see." Clark chuckled derisively. Leaning closer, his face twisted in disbelief and mockery. "Oh, so now you're quoting philosophy at me? You think that changes anything? Get out before I call security!" The tellers exchanged uneasy glances. Some hid their smirks. Others looked down at their registers, pretending to be busy. But one thing was undeniable. Jonathan Roumie was unlike anyone they had ever seen. Clark reached into the bin and plucked out the scorched check, holding it up like a trophy. "Look at this. You call that wealth? That's nothing but ash now. Are you going to argue that?" Jonathan's eyes softened, but his presence only seemed to grow stronger. He leaned slightly forward, not in threat, but in gentle insistence. "It's not about the check. It's about the respect you show or fail to show before knowing a person's worth." A hush fell over the lobby. The weight of his words pressed into the room like a tangible thing. Customers whispered. Some tried to sneak recordings on their phones. Even the old clerk at the back, who had seen decades of human folly, felt the tension in his chest tighten. Clark's pride flared. How dare this man speak to him like that? How dare anyone question his authority? He raised his voice, trying to reclaim control. "I don't care who you are. I run this branch. I am the law in here." Jonathan didn't respond. He didn't need to. His calmness was louder than any words Clark could shout. The lobby seemed to shrink around him, drawing every eye, every breath toward his quiet strength. A child in the waiting area tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Mom." "Who is that?" The mother shook her head, unsure. Even she felt the electricity in the air, the sense that something monumental was happening, though she couldn't put a finger on it. Clark, growing desperate, waved his arms. "Security!" Someone remove this guy. Before anyone could react, Jonathan placed a hand lightly on the counter, leaned forward, and simply said, "Power isn't measured by fear. Respect isn't earned by intimidation. You can choose to learn that lesson, or you can continue living blind to it." The words echoed in the lobby. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Every staff member froze. Every customer leaned forward slightly, sensing the gravity of the moment. Even Clark's own heartbeat seemed to falter, though his ego screamed for control. And then quietly, almost imperceptibly, Jonathan turned toward the door. There was no drama, no rush, no sense of victory, just a gentle nod, a quiet presence leaving the space it had filled. The lobby held its collective breath as he walked out. Phones clicked. Whispers spread like wildfire. People craned their necks, trying to catch a final glance of the man who had remained so calm under blatant disrespect. The old clerk squinted, his brow furrowed. Something about the man's eyes, his presence, felt deeply familiar, but he couldn't place it. All he knew was that the bank had just witnessed something extraordinary, something that would echo far longer than any argument, any shredded or burned check. And in that quiet, tensely charged moment, the lobby didn't yet know the truth. The man they had all underestimated, the man who had let their manager's arrogance burn a check, was no ordinary client. He was the man who would soon change everything in that very bank. Jonathan Roumie walked toward the exit with a quiet, deliberate pace. His calm, unwavering demeanor made the chaos around him feel almost surreal. The smoke from the burned check still lingered in the air, curling like ghostly ribbons around the marble pillars, mixing with the faint scent of coffee and perfume. The lobby was frozen in disbelief. Customers gawked. Some whispered to each other, trying to process what had just happened. Phones appeared in hands. Cameras pointed toward the retreating figure, but no one dared call out as if speaking would shatter the fragile tension. The tellers, who had grown accustomed to Clark's arrogance, exchanged uneasy glances. A few muttered under their breath, questioning what they had just witnessed. The soft murmur of disbelief spread through the crowd like wildfire. The laughter and chatter of a few moments ago had been replaced by a deafening silence, punctuated only by the crackle of smoke. Clark stood behind the counter, frozen in shock. His hands trembled slightly, though he refused to acknowledge it. Pride demanded that he stay composed, but inside doubt crept in like a slow, unwelcome tide. Who was this man? He thought. And how dare he walk away so calmly after I just burned his check? The old clerk near the back of the room squinted, frowning. Something about Jonathan's presence felt familiar, hauntingly so, but the details escaped him. Years of experience had taught him to read people, and this man radiated a quiet authority that demanded attention, not with force, but with integrity. It was the kind of power Clark had never understood. Wait, I've seen him somewhere, the clerk muttered under his breath, leaning closer to a fellow employee. I just can't, something about him. Meanwhile, a few customers whispered among themselves. One man shook his head in disbelief. Did he just let the manager burn his check? Another woman whispered. I've never seen anyone so calm, even when disrespected. The tension thickened with each passing second. The entire lobby seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. Clark's pride bristled, but the unspoken truth began to gnaw at him. The man he had just humiliated didn't react in fear, anger, or desperation. He hadn't demanded security. He hadn't shouted, cursed, or stormed off. Instead, he had walked with a quiet dignity that made Clark's own bravado feel absurdly petty. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing against the doors of the bank, as if nature itself were holding a breath. Then came the subtle, almost imperceptible sound of polished shoes against concrete. It was faint at first, easily lost in the murmur of the lobby, but it grew steadily louder, deliberate, purposeful. Clark's eyes darted to the door. The customers craned their necks. The staff exchanged confused looks. And then it happened. The front door opened, letting in a sharp gust of wind and three figures carrying sleek black folders and an air of urgency. The lobby went completely silent, as if even the walls were waiting to see what would unfold next. The executives moved with efficiency, their eyes fixed on Jonathan Roumie, who had paused near the exit. They didn't speak at first. They simply handed him documents and fell into step behind him, like shadows following the sun. Mr. Roumie, one of them finally said, breaking the silence. We've been waiting for you, sir. Clark froze. His mind struggled to catch up with reality. Oh, wait, Mr. Roumie? You mean... His voice faltered, disbelief written on his face. The old clerk's eyes widened, recognition sparking. Oh, my God, that's him. The realization hit the lobby like a physical blow. The quiet, humble man who had endured Clark's arrogance, the man who had allowed the check to be burned without protest, he wasn't just a client. He wasn't just anyone. He was the new majority owner of the bank, and in that moment the entire dynamic of the room shifted. The manager's smirk disappeared, replaced by a mixture of fear, shock, and dawning humility. The staff and customers looked on in awe. The bank that had moments ago been ruled by arrogance was now poised for change. Change brought in by the quiet strength of a man who had shown them all what true dignity looked like. Clark's pride faltered completely. For the first time in years he felt powerless, and the lobby, once buzzing with normal Monday chatter, became a silent witness to a lesson none would soon forget. The lobby of Grand Summit Bank held its breath. The moment Jonathan Roumie paused near the exit, the air seemed to thicken as if time itself had slowed. Clark, the manager, could hardly believe what he was seeing. The calm, humble man who had allowed his check to burn without protest was suddenly surrounded by an unmistakable aura of authority. And it wasn't just personal presence. Something far greater was at play. Outside, the black sedan had idled quietly, waiting for the signal. Now the three executives, carrying sleek black folders and exuding professionalism, moved with urgency. They converged on Jonathan like a well-trained team executing a perfectly timed operation. "Mr. Roumie," one of them called, voice firm but respectful. "We've been waiting for you, sir. The board is ready for your approval." Clark froze mid-step, the words hitting him like a thunderclap. His eyes widened, pulse racing. "Wait, Mr. Roumie? You mean that's him?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the shock he was trying desperately to suppress. Jonathan turned slowly, the faintest smile on his lips. "Yes," he said quietly. "I am the majority owner of this bank now." A ripple of disbelief coursed through the lobby. Customers whispered frantically, some holding up phones to capture the moment, others too stunned to speak. The tellers, who had witnessed Clark's arrogance firsthand, exchanged astonished glances, unable to hide their awe. The old clerk at the back finally spoke, his voice trembling with realization. "Oh, and I know that face. I've seen him on TV. He's Jonathan Roumie. He's the new owner?" Jonathan's gaze swept across the room. It lingered on Clark, who had taken a half step back, his jaw tight, pride crumbling with each passing second. "I came here to make a simple deposit," Jonathan said, his tone calm, measured. "But I see now that some lessons need to be learned firsthand." Clark's hands trembled. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, searching for words that could undo the humiliation he had just experienced. There were none. He had treated the man like any other client, dismissive, mocking, and arrogant. And now reality had flipped entirely. One of the executives handed Jonathan a folder of documents. He glanced at them briefly, then returned his gaze to Clark. "It's time to make some changes," he said simply. The weight of the statement hit Clark like a physical force. He swallowed hard, trying to maintain some shred of composure. "Sir, I didn't know," he stammered. Jonathan shook his head slightly, his expression gentle but firm. "That's the problem," he said. "Arrogance often blinds us to what truly matters. Respect isn't about status, title, or wealth. It's about how you treat people, especially when you think no one is watching." The room was silent, except for the faint rustle of papers and the soft breathing of those witnessing this monumental shift. Clark's face turned pale. Every ounce of confidence he had carried for years had evaporated in moments. Jonathan then glanced at the old clerk, the one who had remained respectful throughout the encounter. "And you," he said, his tone warm, "have shown what true character looks like. From today, you'll be the new branch manager." A stunned murmur ran through the staff. Clark's knees weakened and he sank slightly, realizing that his reign of arrogance had ended in a single quiet lesson. The executives moved to the door, flanking Jonathan as he prepared to leave. He turned once more, offering a nod to the staff and customers. "Remember this," he said softly. "True power isn't loud. True respect is earned, not demanded." Clark's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His mind raced with shame, regret, and disbelief. He had been blind to the presence of someone far greater than himself, not through wealth but through humility, integrity, and quiet authority. As Jonathan Roumie exited the bank, the silence lingered. Customers and staff alike realized they had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a check being burned, but a moment that would forever change the culture of the bank. The moral was unmistakable. The person you underestimate the most might be the one shaping your future. And in that moment, everyone understood that true respect isn't given. It's earned through patience, humility, and grace. The lobby, once filled with arrogance and chatter, was now a chamber of reflection. And for Clark, the lesson was as clear as it was bitter. Sometimes the quietest people wield the loudest power. The bank lobby was still heavy with disbelief. The smell of burned paper had faded, replaced by an almost tangible tension, a mix of awe, fear, and respect. Clark, the branch manager, stood frozen near the counter, the weight of his actions pressing down like a physical burden. His face was pale, hands trembling slightly, and the confidence that had once radiated from him like a spotlight had evaporated completely. Jonathan Roumie, the man he had just humiliated, now owner of the bank, paused near the exit. The three executives flanked him silently, carrying the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to yell to be obeyed. Jonathan's eyes met Clark's, calm and unwavering, yet full of judgment. Not anger, but disappointment. Clark's knees buckled slightly. He fell to his knees, his pride crumbling entirely. "Sir, I'm so sorry," he stammered. His voice cracked under the weight of shame. "I didn't know who you were. Jonathan knelt slightly to meet him at eye level. "That's exactly the point," he said gently. "Respect shouldn't be given based on who someone is or what they have. It should be given because it's the right thing to do." The room went silent again. Every employee and customer watching as the man who had so confidently wielded arrogance was now humbled before someone who had shown nothing but quiet grace. Clark's trembling hands pressed together, as though in prayer or plea, his mind replaying every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every mocking laugh. Jonathan rose slowly and turned toward the old clerk, the one who had remained calm and respectful throughout the encounter. "You," he said warmly, "have demonstrated what it truly means to lead with integrity. From today, you will be the new branch manager." Gasps and whispers ran through the staff. Clark's face flushed crimson, his jaw tight. He had spent years climbing a ladder built on fear and intimidation, only to be replaced by someone who had practiced humility while he had been blind to the lesson in front of him. Jonathan's gaze swept across the room once more. "Leadership," he said, voice calm but carrying through the space, "isn't about asserting dominance. It's about serving others, lifting them up and earning their respect, not through fear but through patience, kindness, and integrity." Clark tried to speak again, but the words caught in his throat. He wanted to argue, to justify himself, to salvage a shred of dignity, but none of it mattered anymore. Jonathan's quiet authority had already done what shouting or anger never could. It had reshaped the narrative, leaving Clark powerless to resist the lesson. The executives handed Jonathan additional documents, but he didn't rush. Instead, he addressed the staff once more. "This is a turning point," he said softly. "From today onward, let your actions reflect who you want to be, not who you think you need to impress." The employees nodded, some with tears in their eyes, some whispering words of awe. The customers remained still, watching, realizing that the events they had just witnessed were far beyond an ordinary banking transaction. It had become a lesson in character, humility, and leadership, a story they would tell for years. Clark finally lowered his eyes. His pride was gone, replaced by the bitter taste of humility. For the first time, he understood that power wielded poorly was worthless, and that arrogance, no matter how loudly expressed, could crumble in the face of quiet integrity. Jonathan gave one final nod to the staff and the customers before stepping out, leaving the lobby in a silence that was heavy, reflective, and strangely uplifting. Even as he disappeared through the doors, the impact of his presence lingered. Clark remained on his knees for a long moment, the lesson etched into his mind like fire on steel. He had been humbled, yes, but perhaps finally,
he had also been given the chance to learn. The old clerk, now the new branch manager, stood tall,
a quiet confidence replacing the tension that had gripped the room. He understood the responsibility he had inherited, not just of running a bank, but of creating a culture rooted in respect, patience, and integrity. And in that moment, the truth was clear to everyone present. True power isn't loud. True greatness isn't claimed. It's earned quietly and through actions that uplift others rather than belittle them. The lobby, once filled with arrogance and noise, now hummed with reflection and a renewed sense of respect. And for Clark, the lesson was unforgettable. The person you look down on today might be the one shaping your tomorrow. The lobby of Grand Summit Bank was quiet now, but the silence wasn't empty. It was thick with reflection, awe, and a lesson that every single person present would carry with them long after the moment passed. Customers shifted in their seats, the staff straightened, and even the air seemed to hum with understanding. What had started as a routine Monday morning had become something extraordinary, a live demonstration of humility, respect, and the power of quiet integrity. Jonathan Roumie's footsteps had faded into the distance, leaving behind only the echoes of his calm authority. But the impact of his presence lingered like a permanent mark. The burned check, once a symbol of arrogance, had become a metaphor. Paper can be destroyed, but true character endures. The manager, once brimming with pride, sat humbled on the floor, finally realizing the truth he had avoided for years. Respect is not granted based on title, wealth, or power. It is earned quietly through actions and attitude, often long before anyone notices. The staff exchanged glances. Some had been intimidated by Clark's arrogance for years. Some had tolerated small daily humiliations, believing it was just the way things worked. But now they saw another path, a path defined not by fear but by dignity. The old clerk, now appointed as the new branch manager, stood tall, a subtle smile on his face. He understood that leadership isn't about authority or ego. It's about patience, kindness, and the courage to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their status. Customers whispered among themselves, some recording on their phones, others simply watching in awe. They were witnessing a moment that would be retold countless times. The day a man known for humility and calmness humbled an arrogant manager without raising his voice, without anger, without confrontation. The lesson was unmistakable. True power is silent. True greatness is gentle. Clark finally looked up. His pride, once a wall shielding him from the world, had crumbled entirely. Shame and understanding flickered in his eyes. For the first time, he realized that arrogance isn't strength, it's blindness. And the person you look down on today could very well be the one guiding your future tomorrow. Jonathan's words, still ringing in their minds, were simple, but profound. Respect isn't something you show only to the rich or the famous or the powerful. It's something you show to everyone, especially when you think no one is watching. The lesson wasn't just for the staff, the customers, or Clark. It was for anyone who had ever underestimated someone, belittled a stranger, or assumed that appearances determined worth. True respect isn't performative. True respect isn't conditional. It's quiet, constant, and enduring, often revealed only when the world thinks no one is paying attention. As the staff returned to their workstations, they moved differently. There was a lightness to their steps, a new awareness in their interactions. The customers, too, left with a story to tell, one that went far beyond banking transactions. They had witnessed a real-life parable in humility and leadership, a story that would ripple through conversations, social media, and personal reflection. Clark remained on the floor a moment longer, taking in the full weight of the lesson. Slowly he rose, a sense of understanding and humility settling over him. Perhaps, he thought, it's never too late to change. Perhaps true power doesn't come from domination, but from lifting others and showing respect even when it costs nothing. And for Jonathan Roumie, the lesson he left behind was simple yet powerful. Quiet strength often speaks louder than arrogance. Humility endures where ego fails. Respect is the most enduring currency of all. Type respect in the comments if you believe humility is real strength. Let the world know that kindness, patience, and grace will always leave a mark far deeper than arrogance ever could. And tell me where you're watching from, because every kind, humble soul deserves recognition. Remember, the people you underestimate today may be the ones shaping your tomorrow. True power is silent. True respect is earned. And the legacy of humility is far more lasting than any fleeting display of pride.